Good morning, everybody. Welcome to your Rangers Review morning briefing. It is Friday, the 9th of April. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning by Chris Jack. How goes it, Chris?
All good. We're almost through another week. We're almost at the end. It's been another interesting week in the world of Rangers. I think it's safe to say. So heading up to Auchenhowie later on for the press conference. Our usual plug for our coverage of that. Everything on the site and of course on the channel, and we'll be back video wise later on as well, so people can keep up to date with what Barry Ferguson's got to say and whatever player Rangers put up, who we may well speak to for the final time, depending who it is, because safe to say a lot of these guys will be moving on over the course of the summer. So we'll find out who that is when we get there.
Yep, we should hear from Barry around about 1:30, I think it is, normal time, folks, from the Rangers Training Centre. So, as Chris says, the transcript, as ever, will be on the website, and those of you that are extra members will record our usual press conference reaction video a little later on. We'll get into the game in more detail. Not that it matters a great deal, but we'll talk about that in the other Rangers news doing the rounds. Before we do that, quick word for our podcast sponsors, S1 Jobs. If you're looking to hand in your transfer request, folks, head over to S1 Jobs and upload your CV today. There are thousands of jobs across Glasgow, Edinburgh, and the surrounding areas. You'll find the one at S1 Jobs. Right, we'll start first of all with the managerial hunt, Chris, because a new name was doing the rounds yesterday. Just speculation again, not seen anything concrete as such on this guy, but Danny Roll, he has been at Sheffield Wednesday. He has a contract at the Ills until 2027, but it appears that he is looking to move on. He guided Sheffield Wednesday to a mid-table finish in the Championship this season. They've had a bit of a rough time, Sheffield Wednesday, in recent years. The owner is a bit of a the fans aren't a bit of a basket case, really. The fans don't like him. Chansiri is his name, and Roll, by all accounts, has done a decent job there. Speaking to the German media outlet Kicker, he said about his future with regards to reported interest from the Premier League, Bundesliga, and also Saudi Arabian clubs. Says, personally, I had a fantastic time at Sheffield Wednesday. I've made no secret of the fact that I like to work at the highest possible level with the best players in the near future. The Bundesliga is, of course, a consideration, and yet I also know that getting the final nod requires good work, the right people who believe in you, and timing. And if all that comes together, I might have the chance to return to the Bundesliga in the summer or return to the Bundesliga right away. But it could go in a completely different direction. My situation in Sheffield is unofficially relatively clear. There is a clear agreement with the owner about how I envisage my future. Unfortunately, I can't go into detail about that right now. So, yeah, as I mentioned there, Chris has been linked with a move to the Bundesliga and also the Premier League. He's a young guy. I think he's only 36 by all accounts. I've not been keeping a close eye on his coaching ability and how he's got on at Sheffield Wednesday, but a new name doing the rounds, this one.
Are you choosing your word to describe the Sheffield Wednesday owner very carefully there? Yeah, we could period of deliberation there before he decided how to sum up his tenure. I think he has. I don't follow Sheffield Wednesday that closely, obviously, but even from afar, I think you can say that they have been working under some difficult circumstances. And you mentioned that relationship that the owner has with the fans doesn't seem to be the best, and he's also put his faith in a young manager, which is a credit to him. Roll's got an interesting CV. He's clearly a guy who's a real student of the game. You don't get to be a manager even at that level in the English second tier at 36 if you've not really thrown yourself into that particular path from a yearly age. So it's interesting that this is the next name that's doing the rounds. I'm sure there will be one of many. It picked up fairly quickly yesterday. I think it was TalkSport had the story to say that he was going to be leaving Wednesday, and a bit of Premier League interest in him as well. I think Southampton were one of the clubs that came muted, and as you've outlined there, Germans and Saudi Arabia as well have been credited with an interest. So who knows? He may well be on the Rangers list. He wasn't a name that had really kind of been on the radar until yesterday. But as always, these things come around. We are endeavouring to try and find out if there's anything in this one from a Rangers perspective, or if this will be a flash in the pan one. So as soon as if we can get anything on it, of course, the viewers and the readers will be the first people to know.
Yep. What's your hunch? I mean, some of the names being suggested, I've said before, Chris, is no one that's really bowled me over. Do you think that the new owners will go completely left field, someone that we're not thinking about at this point in time? How do you see them? What route do you see them going down?
I think it's hard to tell because we don't have a huge back catalogue of evidence to actually look at. There's no point in looking at how they run the 49ers in terms of the managerial and head coach appointments that they make there, because it's got no relevance to how they could do things in Glasgow. And at Leeds, obviously, they've got Daniel Farke in there, a guy who knows the Championship, who is very much a good manager at that level. They have also decided to stick with him going into the Premier League. Interesting to see how long that lasts. If they go up and it's not a good start to the season, does that pressure build, and do they think, well, actually, we made the wrong call back in this guy, let's go and make a change? Or do they have full faith in Farke to go and lead them into that entire campaign? So we don't really know what their style is in terms of picking football managers and how they invest in a football manager outside of Leeds. You have to say the backing that they gave Farke over the last couple of seasons in terms of wages, in terms of the transfer budget, and going and building that Championship squad, it's paid off for them. But we don't really know what they will see in a Rangers manager. Outlined on the site at the start of the week, there's almost two trains of thoughts. Do you go fairly safe and steady, and someone who knows British football perhaps, and who can come in, make Rangers better, perhaps not make them swashbuckling to watch, but make them better, make them efficient, make them effective, and basically turn them into title challengers? Or do you say, well, this is a new project and we want a guy that's going to be a bit more expansive, be a bit more longer term, perhaps a bit younger, and he's going to go and lead this project going forward, and he's going to be the man for as many years as we can get out of him? So I think once you decide what camp you're in on that, then you can start narrowing it down in terms of what experience does he have to have, what track record in the transfer market does he have to have, does he have league medals to his credit, has he only won a cup, has he never won anything at all? And once you've decided on that, then you can get into personality. Can he handle Rangers? Can he handle the press? Can he handle the fans? Can he handle the expectation? Can he be a figurehead for the club? And then once you tick all those particular boxes, then you start to get down to names and the guys that really can tick as many of those particular boxes as possible. So I know everyone, I made this point to someone the other day there, almost every person I speak to, the first question is, who's going to be the new Rangers manager? Trust me, if I knew, I would tell you. I'm not sitting on a state secret here, unfortunately. If I knew, I would put it out there, and I would tell the review readers and viewers. But I don't have that particular bit of information right now. But we are very much on the case. Let it be known.
Yeah, I love this. James says Duncan Ferguson is itching for another job. Get him in. Did enjoy him. He was on TalkSport recently. He was on with Ali a couple of days ago, and he's got a real enthusiasm and love for the game. Really wish him well when his next job, wherever that takes him. I think he's a rough couple of jobs at Forest Green and at Inverness as well. But Duncan Ferguson, it's a case of what if when he was a player at Rangers. I would be amazed if he was getting the call, Chris. But he would knock the squad into shape, that's for sure.
Like you, I would be amazed if that particular phone call is made. I would like to see Ferguson back in the game at some point. I don't think he's, as you mentioned there, he's not really had much luck in terms of the managerial appointments that he has had. Forest Green just looked a really strange fit from the off. Inverness, obviously off-field developments then take over, and it becomes a really, really difficult job, and also decides to move on from there. So clearly these type of suggestions come up fairly regularly when we're having these conversations, and I think it shows the esteem that Duncan Ferguson is still held in amongst the Rangers fans, that they think now he could still come into the club and do a job. I don't see it happening, but as Paul says there, he does have a good coaching.
Worked under some top managers.
He's worked under some big managers down at Everton. Maybe that's his role. Maybe he is a number 2, number 3 coach rather than a head coach in his own right. But I would like to see him back in the game and getting another. I think if he has another crack at it and it doesn't work out, that's probably the end of it. But I think given the difficult experiences he's had over the first 2 jobs, I think he's worth another shot from someone. But you would imagine it would be at a lower level than Rangers.
Yeah, top guys. Duncan Ferguson. David Clark says, Chris, is it set in stone we're not going to hire a man that's had a link with Rangers in the past? This is following your great piece earlier on in the week over on the website. It certainly got tongues wagging and a few raised eyebrows, and certainly would, if the new owners are going down that route, would discount a return for Steven Gerrard in that respect.
Set in stone and Rangers don't really those two things don't always correlate. It's a club that doesn't really do set in stone. But I think that piece that I had on the site kind of outlined where I think Rangers are in terms of the process. And I think one of the other kind of points that came from it was who's making the call right now. Dave King then obviously spoke a couple of days later and outlined what he believes will be the timescales. And I think, or I hope that what Dave said and that what we've written on the site over the last few weeks, the points that we've tried to make on the show, Rangers are not standing still. It's not a club that's in a state of flux, just waiting for bits of paper to be signed before they can start moving on. You will see a manager over the next few weeks, as Barry outlined last week. Pre-season will start at the end of June. You'll then have European qualifiers just a couple of weeks after that, and we know how difficult these games are. We know the importance of these games, so they're very much on the case. Kevin Thelwell now in as sporting director, and above him Greta Steinson as technical director of the 49ers. These are the guys that are calling the shots. Again, as outlined in another piece a couple of weeks ago, the current board, the current investors, they are not the ones that are going to be picking this manager. They are very much keeping the seats warm until all that paperwork is signed and sealed and everything's in place. So it's very much the new owners, the new regime that are calling the shots and are leading this process. And that's, as we not to go back to the point made earlier on, that's why it's difficult to know exactly what route they will go down in terms of a profile, because we just don't know. There's not enough evidence to suggest, and unsurprisingly, a lot of people keeping their cards very close to their chest when it comes to this particular decision.
I think it's going to be a key appointment. There's no question about that. Hopefully, Rangers can get it right, because the last 3 appointments haven't gone to plan. Speaking of appointments, I've seen that we'll cross to the Europa League. Willie with the point says, if we'd beaten Bilbao, then Man United be looking forward to a very winnable final against Spurs. So Man United and Spurs will contest that final in Bilbao after quite extraordinary comeback from Man United yesterday at Old Trafford. I think in the last 20 minutes he scored 4 goals to wipe the floor with Bilbao to win 7-1 on aggregate. Bilbao had scored a screamer in the first half to make it a little nervy. But they really turned on the afterburners and saw that one through. And Tottenham won 2-0 away to Bodo Glimt last night as well. I've seen someone last night, Chris, saying if Rangers had kept Clement, could they have got further than Barry would have done in the Europa League? It's all ifs and buts, of course. Do you think he could have got Rangers into the semi and beyond, perhaps?
I think there's an old Glasgow phrase about your auntie and your uncle that comes to mind here. I don't think so. I think actually I had this conversation with a couple of guys last week, and I was talking about should Rangers have just stuck with Clement, because what did they have to lose? Obviously domestically nothing, and it wouldn't have happened. It couldn't have happened because the fan base, as we saw on the show, as we saw on social media, we saw at the games, and from getting out and about, speaking to people, the fan base was in such a a state of anger and apathy and upset against Clement. It was toxic. He could not have continued. Even the lure of, well, he's got a fairly good European record, we could maybe try and get through another round. It wouldn't have been enough, because the domestic form would have been even worse than the domestic form has been now. There's not been this huge upturn under Barry in terms of the Premiership, but it would have been even worse under the previous regime. The mood amongst the fans, the mood at Ibrox, it was only going one way, and I think that would have ultimately filtered into the European experience, and it would have made life really, really difficult for Rangers. The club could not have continued to this stage with Clement still being in charge. That decision had to be made at that time. It should have been made a long time before that. So I don't buy into the theory of, well, if only we kept him, we could be looking at a European final. Ultimately, Rangers did very well to get beyond Fenerbahce. They didn't do enough in those ties against Athletic. Things obviously conspiring against them in terms of the red card at Ibrox, and injuries and other situations in the game, or in both games. But ultimately, they didn't do enough. They didn't have enough to go on and beat Athletic. Could they have beaten Man United? Perhaps. Would you fancy a chances in a one-off against either Man United or Spurs? I think you probably would, given their respective issues over the course of the season. I think if Rangers had got to the final, you would certainly fancy their chances of going and giving it a real good go. But one of these things we will never know, unfortunately.
Yep. CGM55 says if Dessers had been given that penalty, he would have beaten Bilbao. Man United would have beaten us. Still, I would love to hear an explanation about that, incidentally, from UEFA, why that wasn't given. That was a huge moment in the game. You rightly point out the proper sending off at Ibrox. If he doesn't get dismissed, then the Rangers take the lead over there. Again, all ifs and buts. But interesting point of view. If Rangers should have stuck with Clement, I get your point about the fan base. Barry certainly reconnected much of the fans at that time. I think it was necessary. But again, this is a Rangers squad that provides moments, and that's it. So when Barry does leave at the end of the season, we thank him for Fenerbahce and Parkhead. That's pretty much it. In terms of domestically, we've not really seen an upturn that new manager bounce, have we? I don't think Barry has achieved more than what Clement would have done domestically, Chris.
And certainly the Ibrox record is something that I know we've spoken a lot about over recent weeks, but it's just completely and utterly embarrassing and unacceptable for a Rangers squad to be 3 months on and to not win a game at Ibrox. That has to change heading into next season. If it doesn't change, you can forget all about extended European runs or winning domestic silverware. So there's an issue that has to change. I hope that Barry does get that Ibrox win. It would be I think it'd be a shame for him on a personal basis if he was to go through this interim spell and end it without having tasted a victory at Ibrox. And of course, it's not going to mean anything in the grand scheme of things. Rangers been so far ahead, title being wrapped up long ago. But I think it'd be a negative for him if he doesn't get the Ibrox win. So obviously Aberdeen on Sunday, Dundee United next week. They are both very winnable games if Rangers play well. Too often they've just not played well at Ibrox. There seems to be a real problem at Ibrox over recent months. So it has to be solved. I think the players need to take a lot of the stick for that. The players need to take a lot of responsibility for that. But I say hopefully Barry can get that. It can get that win. That it would not be a huge thing for him, but I think it would be a big thing for him if he could get that victory.
Yeah, and what do you think for the Europa final? Who do you fancy for that one? I think it would be. I know, of course, Ange's come in for a lot of stick at Spurs. I do. It would be quite funny if he does win that trophy, given his interview earlier on this season says he always wins something in his second season. I think he would be quite right to leave if he acquires that trophy. I think he'll be leaving anyway, even if he doesn't. How do you see it going, Chris?
I think it's a bit of a toss of a coin. It's two teams that have clearly not had good domestic campaigns, who have done well in European fixtures. It's two squads that have a lot of improvement. It's two managers that are under a bit of pressure and questions of their own to answer. Like you, I wouldn't be surprised if Postecoglou ends up leaving Spurs, regardless of how this goes. It feels like their fans are going on this kind of downward trend with him, and they've not really got behind him this season. I know he's obviously had his own issues to contend with in terms of the number of guys they've lost through injury. So I think it's probably a big chance for him to almost go out on a high. For Amarim, let's talk about a manager that needs a result and that needs a performance. It's not been. We speak about Rangers not having a new manager bounce domestically. Man United have not had that either. They have to an extent in Europe. I thought they were really impressive last week. They also managed to get the job done last night. So both of them need it almost for the same reasons and for different reasons. But I think people will tune in and almost have a bit of a regret that it's not Rangers that they're watching in that game, because I say, but for events as outlined earlier on, there's every chance that it could well have been. So that's a sore one to sit and watch, because it's only a few weeks ago since a lot of people were on this show and a lot of people were speaking round about the club about the what if, and speaking about dreaming and daring to dream, and if you do this and you do this, that quickly got away from Rangers, unfortunately.
Yeah, moving on, but slightly deviating. Iron Blue says, did you see the United tifo last night? Even worse than Arsenal's. Yeah, it was garbage. And the Arsenal one was diabolical. And the Man United one, they're all singing its praises. I've seen a lot of tweets last night saying, oh, it's a brilliant tifo. Not in the same stratosphere as the Rangers ones, unfortunately. And that brings us nicely on to Tifo Gate, because, of course, earlier this week, the Rangers hierarchy met with the fans advisory board with regards to the Tifo that angered a few people after the weekend fixture against Celtic. Of course, if you were on the moon, folks, or never watched the game, it had an image of club legend Graham Souness holding a shotgun with the message underneath saying, take aim at the rebel scum. Now, the fans advisory board met with CEO Patrick Stewart, Chief of Communications Greg Mailer, on Tuesday evening. The minutes of that meeting have now been published by the fan board. The club refutes the notion that they were knee-jerk in their approach to reacting to the tifo with their statement that they released following the game. Another takeaway from the meeting was that the club did not have prior approval to the contents of the banner. I'll read some of the minutes from that. The strength of feeling amongst the fan base on the issue is very strong in terms of the club's handling of the situation. This was echoed by the FAB and firmly conveyed. The club statement was perceived as being issued too quickly and in a reactionary manner. There is a recurring frustration that while the club acts quickly to condemn its own fans, it does not consistently defend their own supporters when they are the target of provocative or offensive actions by others. Now, you can go and read that full minutes of the meeting, folks, over on the website. Interesting stuff there. Rangers, obviously, giving over their side of the story. Chris, I said it when we were on, I think on Monday, I think it was. I don't want to go down the route where the club have an overarching say on tifos, as I just touched on there. The Man United and Arsenal banners were rubbish. I think that Union Bears do unveil some real cracking tifos at times. What's your how weird do you sit on that?
On club having approval on them, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that would take the edge off some of them, and almost if you do everything by committee, it waters down a lot of things. Ultimately, though, there has to be a trust between the club, the board, and the fans group that are going to do these displays. There has to be that level of trust there. I think over the course of the season, that trust has probably been eroded and been damaged. Heading into the new season with a new regime and a fresh start on and off the park, that level of trust has to be rebuilt. The guys in the director's box cannot be sitting looking over to the right hand side and terrified at what message is going to be unfurled, or what banner is going to be there, or what songs are going to come from that area. So that level of trust has to be rebuilt. I think the Union Bears in general, they do a lot for the atmosphere, both visually and also in terms of noise levels and the atmosphere. Some of their behaviour over the course of the season, I think, has been questionable. So the summer has to be a reset for them as well, in terms of where do they go and how do they rebuild that relationship with the club. I think in a wider issue or an issue on that banner, we spoke about it on Monday. The club statement said that it crossed the line. If that is the case, and they do believe that it did cross a line, they have to make that line very, very clear to the Union Bears and to the support in general, because I think it's safe to say, from what we've seen, social media and comments on the show over the last week or so, the fans don't believe that it crossed the line. The fans don't see where that line is. So if the club do believe that to be the case, and that's their standpoint on it, then they need to make that very clear of where that line is and what they believe is acceptable and what's not acceptable. We can't operate in this grey area. It was a bold call, to say the least, to be as critical of your own fans. Certainly in this season of all seasons, where again wider fan relations with the club or with the board, it's not been good. There's been a number of issues over the course of the season. We saw that at various points with the banners against the board and the songs and the chants against the board. If this takeover had not been in the offing, and the prospect of new faces and new voices and new investment had not been there, that would have only escalated over the last couple of months. And you almost hate to think what position the fans and the board would have been in terms of their relationship. So, as I mentioned there, I think the summer offers a reset for that particular relationship. Ultimately, you can't have the fans being anti-board all the time, and you can't have the board coming out with statements against their own fans. That's a fight that ultimately they're not going to win. The fans are the most important people. Now, we speak about investors and new director of football and players, managers, all the rest of it. The fans make Rangers Football Club. The fans are the most important people at Rangers Football Club. That doesn't mean to say that they are always right, that their opinion always has to carry, but you have to keep it in mind their importance. And when you're going to be as critical of them publicly as they have been, you have to, if you do that, you have to be aware of how that's going to be seen and what the ramifications of that potentially are.
Yes. Right. Moving on then, staying with the Europa League, because, of course, with Bilbao's elimination, it means that Rangers will have to play 3 qualifiers to reach the Champions League group stage. I think the first qualifier, am I right in thinking it's the back end of July, 22nd or 23rd, there or thereabouts? So they'll enter at the second qualifying round stage. If they defeat whoever they come up against there, they'll reach the third qualifying round stage, and then if they win that game, they reach the playoff. Just unreal the amount of qualifiers you have to play these days to get into this tournament. It really beggars belief, but there you go. Incidentally, if they get knocked out in the qualifying round 2, I believe they drop into the Europa League third qualifying round. If they drop out of that, they go into the Conference League playoff, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong there, but there is obviously you do drop into the other competitions if you are knocked out at various stages. There is a possibility, I think, that Rangers can be knocked out of Europe altogether. So you do want to avoid that, Chris. But there's a lot of fans saying, need to get a move on here. They'll be around before you know it. You've said it yourself. Barry's said it. Dave King said it on TalkSport as well. You don't want to be going in here a la last season, Dynamo Kyiv, when the team weren't really prepared. We had the stadium farce going on as well. You want to have all your ducks in order, if you like, and go into these qualifiers as strong as you possibly can.
you probably have to say there is all but no chance of Rangers being fully up to speed and good to go by the end of July, or for that first tie. So much work to be done on this squad. I don't think it's realistic for a manager to come in and go through that entire process with Kevin Thelwell and to have everyone in place by that date. It's not going to happen. The best that Rangers can hope for is to be in as best a position as possible for those games. You mentioned the Kiev game there; they were not in that best position for that tie.
Still say though, that's Jefty sending off tons a game. That's the worst.
It does
penalty, the worst decision I've ever seen.
That farcical decision, it does take the game away from Rangers, and is very costly in football and financial terms. But over the two ties, Rangers were nowhere near ready. They weren't good enough heading into that tie. There's two trains of thought almost on having that really early tie. Yes, it's a potential banana skin, team not ready, pre-season just finished, still trying to get up to speed. It also gives you a competitive game early on. I think you'd rather play a competitive game than play a bounce game behind closed doors or go and play a friendly somewhere. So you know what the start date is. You need to be as ready as possible for it. As we keep saying, there is so much work to be done on this squad. So it'll be really busy once the manager's in. I think the first few weeks of his tenure, they're going to be really, really busy. Still to hear about pre-season plans and where they're going to be going as well. So just a few items on the to-do list right now.
Yep, and the next one, of course, is you heading along to the training centre this afternoon for the we've got 3 more of these press conferences to go, and then we'll wrap up for what has been a very forgettable season. But we'll wrap up there for now on the show, folks. Before we do that, before I forget, we are giving away a wonderful signed and framed Ali McCoist shirt from the 9 in a row season, as you can see there on your screen. If you want to be in with a chance of winning that, all you have to do is sign up to the website. It's just £1 for 6 months. Head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe to sign up. You have until midnight on the 12th of May. So over the weekend, make sure you're signed up. Existing subscribers automatically entered into the giveaway. Right, we will be back later on, folks. If we don't speak to you later, then enjoy your Friday, whatever you are doing. And we'll chat to you again sometime soon. Bye for now.